My name is Emily, and this is the story I never thought I'd tell. I grew up in a house that was supposed to be my safe place. But from the moment my mom remarried, everything changed. My stepbrother, Jake, was 3 years older than me. To the outside world, he was the golden boy, charming, good-looking, and always knowing the right things to say. But behind closed doors, he was someone else entirely. It started small. At first, it was just words. He'd insult me, make fun of the way I looked, the way I spoke. He would take my things and laugh when I got upset. I told my mom, but she always brushed it off. "Boys will be boys," she'd say. "He's just teasing." But it didn't stop. As I got older, Jake got bolder. He'd shove me against walls when no one was looking, whisper threats in my ear. And when I turned 14, the real nightmare began. At night, I'd hear his footsteps outside my door. I'd hold my breath, hoping he would go away. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. I tried to tell my mom again, but by then, she had stopped listening. My stepdad adored Jake, and nothing I said would change that. I learned to keep quiet, to endure, to survive. I don't know why I'm telling this now. Maybe because I'm tired of carrying this alone. Maybe because someone out there needs to know they're not the only one. I'm still here, and I'm still fighting, and this story isn't over yet. I remember the night it got worse. I had just turned 15. It was late, past midnight, and the house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I had fallen asleep clutching a book, my only escape from reality, when I felt something, someone, standing near my bed. I froze. My heart pounded so loudly, I was afraid he could hear it. "Wake up," Jake whispered, his voice dangerously low. I wanted to scream, but my voice got stuck in my throat. Before I could react, he grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin. "Don't make a sound," he hissed. Tears burned in my eyes, but I bit my lip to keep them from falling. I knew if I fought back, it would only make things worse. I had learned that the hard way. He left after what felt like an eternity, and I curled up into myself, shaking uncontrollably. I wanted to run away, but where would I go? Who would believe me? The next morning, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The bruises on my arm were a cruel reminder of the night before. I pulled on a long-sleeved sweater, hiding the evidence, just like I always did. At school, I walked through the halls like a ghost. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever did. But I knew I couldn't live like this forever. Something had to change. And soon, I started keeping count. The nights he came into my room, the bruises that took weeks to fade, the number of times I tried to tell my mom but lost my nerve at the last second. It became a twisted routine, one I felt powerless to break. I stopped talking as much, stopped making eye contact. I barely ate. My teachers noticed. But when they asked if I was okay, I smiled and said I was just tired. Nobody questioned it. Nobody ever did. But then, something happened. One evening, I was sitting alone in the school library, pretending to read, when a voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Hey, Emily." I looked up and saw Daniel. He was in my history class, but we had never really talked. He had this easygoing smile, but it faded the moment he saw my face. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just stressed about homework." He hesitated. "I see you alone a lot. You don't really talk to anyone. He stopped, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just wanted to check on you." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever asked before. No one had ever noticed. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I had forgotten existed. Hope. That night, when I heard Jake's footsteps outside my door, I didn't just curl up and wait for it to be over. I made a decision. I was going to fight back. The next night was the same as all the others. The silence, the fear, the footsteps outside my door. But this time, I wasn't frozen. I was ready. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone. The light from the screen felt like a lifeline. I typed the words that had been buried in me for so long. Jake is hurting me. I hesitated for a second before pressing send, my heart pounding in my chest, but it was too late to turn back now. My finger hovered over the screen, waiting for a reply, and then it came. "Emily, are you safe?" It was Daniel. His message was like a rush of cold water on a hot day, unexpected and refreshing. He had no idea what was happening, but somehow, his simple question made me feel like I wasn't alone anymore. "Number, he's outside my door." I didn't expect a response so fast, but there it was, only a few seconds later. "Call the police, Emily. You don't deserve this." I was scared, terrified, but in that moment, something inside me snapped. I couldn't let him control me anymore. Not after everything. Not after what he'd done. I stood up and grabbed my phone with shaking hands. I dialed the number I had never thought I would need. The moment the operator picked up, I heard my voice crack as I told them everything. I didn't care if my mom wouldn't believe me. I didn't care if Jake was going to be angry. I didn't care about anything but getting out. By the time the police arrived, Jake had already fled. He must have heard the sirens and run, but the damage was done. My world had already changed. The officers were kind but firm. They didn't ask if I was sure. They didn't question my story. They believed me. That night, my mom was too shocked to say much when they spoke to her. She didn't know what to believe. And as much as I wanted to scream at her for never seeing it, I knew she would never understand. Not unless she experienced it for herself. But the most important thing was, I was free. Jake was arrested. The charges were clear, and I had a voice that couldn't be ignored anymore. Things didn't immediately get better. It took time. It took therapy. It took the courage to rebuild my life. But I'm here. I'm alive. And for the first time in a long time, I can breathe without fear. So if you're out there, feeling like no one sees you, like no one cares, please know that you're not alone. You can find the strength to fight back. I did. And my story isn't over yet. As the days passed, I started to find pieces of myself that I had forgotten. I learned to trust again, slowly. I had people around me, friends like Daniel, who made sure I wasn't alone, even when I felt like I was still picking up the pieces of my shattered world. I began to feel safe in places I had once feared. At home, my mom started to come to terms with what happened. It wasn't easy for her to understand why I hadn't spoken up sooner, but we worked through it, and I could see the guilt in her eyes. I didn't blame her anymore. I couldn't. She wasn't the cause of what Jake had done, but she had become part of it by not seeing the signs. I talked to a counselor who helped me understand that what Jake had done wasn't my fault. I hadn't deserved it. It wasn't my responsibility to protect him, no matter how much he tried to make me feel like I owed him something. My healing wasn't a straight path, but I knew I was moving forward. One day, I met with Daniel at the cafe near school. He gave me a small, supportive smile as we talked about everything that had happened. His understanding felt like a balm to my wounded soul. "You're stronger than you think," he said. I smiled at him, feeling for the first time like I could believe in that. I didn't have to be the girl who kept everything hidden anymore. I could be me, whole and unbroken. And for the first time, I could see the future not as a place of fear, but as a place full of possibilities. There was no more running, no more hiding. There was only living. It wasn't the life I had once imagined, but it was my life, and I was ready to live it. This is my story, but it doesn't define me. I'm more than the girl who was hurt. I'm Emily, and I'm stronger than ever. This is where my story ends. But for me, it's only just the beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.